Hi everyone, and welcome back to yet another cracking edition of the Middle Ageless Men Show. And with us, as always, we're talking about middle ageless stuff. So welcome back, Brent, Rich. How you guys been?
Got a cold. I went riding my motorcycle in the rain yesterday. So, and then I suffered for it. I'm old AF, and so I had a cold. I didn't sleep properly last night, and I feel a bit snotty. I'm
But
not
you
as
look
tough as I used to
fantastic,
be.
though. What's up with the waistcoats
Yeah,
and the
what's it with the
tie?
tie? That's proper formal, hey?
No, I was having a couple of in-person meetings today, and I was actually looking for a new Baker Boy hat, flat cap that I wanted to buy. So I was thinking about this yesterday. I was watching videos on this. I've got a Newsboy. I wanted to get a Baker Boy. That's a slightly puffier one. And then I thought, I'm going to wear my flat cap tomorrow. And then I thought, well, I'm going to wear my flat cap. I'm going to dress up a little bit. And then I got dressed this morning, and then Bailey said, I like your outfit, but it looks better without the hat. So then I left the hat, and I'm stuck with the other bit. So everything got asked about face, but there we go.
Cool. Good.
Daughters.
All good. And you, Matt, how are you?
Yeah, good, man. Good. It's definitely warming up. Did I tell you about my ride to Oklahoma?
That's amazing,
You sent
bro.
us a couple of
You sent us some pictures.
You sent us a couple of clips, right? Was that the same trip?
Yes, yeah, it was crazy, man. It was awesome. So we did about 500 miles across 3 states. So through the south of Colorado to through New Mexico down to Oklahoma. Oklahoma is like you can literally see Dorothy on the prairies there, clicking the hills. It's so flat, man. And like I've never seen roads as flat and as long, like dirt roads, as I've seen there. It's just quite remarkable. It's like there's just so much space, and people just went going that way.
And was it
So
mostly dirt? Was it mostly dirt road? Like
Yeah,
of the
100%.
500?
It was probably around 425 miles of dirt, which was great.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
so it was awesome.
Okay, good
And
stuff.
you guys, what's been happening, Brent?
And the new bike, all good?
Yeah, I love it, dude. I'm so much more comfortable on that thing. So my previous one was the 890. That's just a beast. It's very
It's too
heavy.
big.
So if you drop that thing, it sucks. But the 500 has got gas. It's very easy to control and to steer and that kind of stuff. And you don't feel like you're going to lose the front in any second, when you're carrying any kind of speed. It's got ridiculous ground clearance. We wound up, when we got to like the accommodation called Great Plains in in Oklahoma, it had rained. So when it rains there, it's quite remarkable how it changes. It goes from like dust. And when I say dust, I mean, I've never seen dust like it. So we're all riding like single file or whatever. And then I'm at the back, and I'm probably like 300 feet, maybe 100 meters behind the guy in front of me. And you can see him. And then he'll go over a hill, and just the dust would just explode up into the air, like just fucking insane. And then you can't see the guy in front of you. And Nina was actually telling me that she's reading a book actually about Oklahoma, and back in the day when they first landed here and so forth. Basically, there was only money in California at the time because of gold. And so they called them the Oklahomas, because they brought people from like Oklahoma to California to actually mine gold and stuff. So they made money, went back there. But at the time, there was something called dust pneumonia. So there was so much dust when the wind blew that people would get sick with pneumonia and die. And so I was like, fucking hell, this is like, it's actually real. Like the dust just explodes up in your face. But then it rained, and then it turns into a mud pit. So we were riding through these incredible like mud fields, basically.
Often were you off-road? Were you on roads mostly, or dirt roads, or gravel?
Off-road, dude. Off-road pretty much the whole way here. We wanted to come back faster, so on the second day, so that was probably we were on more tarmac on that day. But otherwise, pretty much from Colorado down to to Oklahoma, you can be off-road most of it, like 90% of it.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was good fun. Yeah,
good stuff.
And Brent, so what's been going on with you, man? Give us the quick 60-second update.
The quick 60 seconds is son's turning 4 months in a week, and we can see the curve of it getting easier in terms of, keeps his head up, almost sitting, starting to eat solids. I'm amazed at how incredibly naive we were on the first child in terms of the shit we bought we didn't need. Like we started feeding him solids this week. So like, take a spoon, mash the avo, shove it in his mouth, right? This is now. First kid, feeding chair, bib, plastic spoon, plastic thing. Like everything had to be like off the shelf, new and careful. And you realize it's all just bullshit. It's all just marketing. You do not need stuff. And I'm sure everyone who's had two kids probably close together has probably realized this, but it's fascinating to me how our attitude towards my son in terms of how bulletproof he is compared to my daughter, even though she was obviously as bulletproof, that whole thing has completely changed. So that's part one. Part two, I had my regular once a year skin cancer check fob and walked into the doctor a few weeks ago going, I think there's a little thing here, just a little thing. She was like, okay, that's cute. We'll cut that out. Don't worry about it. But this thing on your neck and this thing on your arm and this thing on your elbow, we're going to cut that and stitch that. And when you walk into something going, this is going to be a quick 15-minute procedure and you walk out with stitches everywhere. So that's, and the problem with that is you can't ride a bike for 2 weeks because I can't put a helmet on. I can't sleep on the side of my neck on the pillow. And then I'm wrestling with my daughter.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is why the podcast is called The Middle-Ageless Men.
So I was gonna say this, right? Is that you realize, and it's funny because I speak to a lot of people all the time, and you get to a point around the 50s where you realize that people you're speaking to, everyone has their physical ailments, which they're going to take into old age. And I'm physically outside of that, like I have no bone problems. I have no other issues. My gut works beautifully. There's no issues there. I have skin issues, right? Like that's my issue. I speak to the people and they have like, and maybe it's hereditary, but it's like, it's their thing that they're now taking forward. And I know, Rich, we spoke about this last time where you talked about stopping jiu-jitsu because it's got to a point where it's no longer fun, right? But I ran this morning for the first time, probably properly in 3 months, and 5.5 Ks. And I said to the guys, you just got to leave me here. Like, just go. Actually, like I'm so unfit, and you realize you can't cheat running. And the older you get, you can't just get on the road and run 10 Ks. You just cannot do that. You actually have to like maintain some level of fitness. So I think it's interesting to me because I'm becoming very aware of the fact that I'm aging. And I'm listening to my friends' parents losing friends and losing sisters. And it's like they're all at that age where they're in their 70s to 80s. And they're all starting to slowly but surely, pass away. And then you realize, oh, we're going to enter that phase at some point too, where people, start passing away, right? So there's like this weird fragility of life. And off the back of that, obviously, I want to buy more bikes and do more camping. Like, life is short. Let's spend some cash. You know what I mean? So that's kind of me in a nutshell at the moment.
And you, Rich, what's your 60-second update?
Ironman TT 2 weeks has started. So last week I went down and watched a bit of the Southern 100. That's just I mean, literally the road, the closest road to me right here is part of the track. So the bikes were going down there, all the classics. The TT started officially, the first practice day was a few days ago. We've not been up to see it. I was hoping to actually go up tonight. I'm just not feeling great. But yeah, it's really exciting. There's such a buzz on the island. I was saying to Brent just before you jumped on, Matt, the funny thing is, so I've been riding around a bit, and the irony for me is I don't really love riding my motorcycle on the Isle of Man because I'm kind of spoiled by the fact that speeding fines in South Africa were kind of the tax you paid to ride fast. There was no consequence of it, so you just rode too fast kind of everywhere, and people were expecting you to ride fast. Like cars just moved out the way, you came bombing up the side. Whereas here, that certainly wouldn't be tolerated. If you were bombing around like I was, I mean, doubling the speed limit in places and stuff like that, you'd be in huge trouble. And the one place where there is no speed limits, there are little driveways where people can pull out in tractors. So the areas, the areas where you can speed, you feel quite nervous doing it. And yeah, so I realized I've always said to you guys, I'm a commuter on my bike. Like I like bombing through traffic and riding. I don't like going on big long rides and things. And so for my style of riding, the island isn't actually that convenient, which was quite ironic. Like I'm not sure I'll keep my bike is the long and short of it.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing is, I know we've spoken about, Matt's been trying to get us over to the States to do some long distance riding. And the reality, Matt, is that like I'm doing a trip in 2 weeks for 2 nights. And I'm actually dreading the sand and dreading the off-road. Like, it's not my favorite. I'm not the most comfortable. I probably don't have the right bike. But also, I don't really want to fall. Like, I just don't want to drop a bike and deal with that, or like so I'm a little bit hesitant. But having said that, and I know that Rich and I are probably slightly older than you, Matt, but my 50th is coming up, and I've started following these guys in Sicily and Italy. It's the same company, and they've got this thing called the 70s Bike Adventure Touring Company or something. It's like the 70s. And they've got about 15 bikes. They're all old Ducatis, old Hondas, old Yamahas from like the 70s. And this is like a 5-star-ish. I say it's 5 stars, probably 3 to 5 star. 6 nights, either around Sicily or through the Winelands or through Tuscany or the Amalfi Coast. And it's 50,000 Rand, which is what, about $2,500 without flights, right? But I'm going, I think that's what I want to do for my 50th. I want to find a bunch of guys that I like. Or if I'm lucky, 1 or 2, and just go jump on a tour and spend 6 nights cruising around. And obviously Instagram lies to you, but my God, the imagery is just epic. And the food and the fact you're not carrying gear because it's a supported tour. So you get to a hotel and all your shit is there. I'm like, that's the way I want to do it. It's like a bit more comfortable, and you're going slowly on these older bikes. So it's not like a long distance. You're doing a couple of 100 Ks a day if you're lucky, and you're basically getting up, having breakfast, pretty view, pretty lunch, somewhere pretty, have a beer, go home and sleep. Like I would imagine that's sort of the cadence. And I was like, it's so appealing to me at the moment. So appealing. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So you're going to do it?
So I actually put an inquiry through to see whether I want to understand whether there's like who actually attends these things. Because like it's always like 10, 15 guys, but I don't want to rock up and be the only guy that speaks English, or, you know, like I don't want to spend 6 days on my own, literally. So I'm trying to get a sense of who's on the tour. But I think that's, you know, it seems cheap, add in a few flights. And if you want to bump up to a private room, it's a couple of £100 extra.
So when's your birthday, the 50th?
It's next year, 1st of March.
Next year, okay.
And the first one, and mine's in October.
This year?
Yeah.
How are you feeling about your 50th, Rich?
Yeah, I want to ask you that.
I think I said, did I say to you guys last year, my I think I did last episode, my epiphany on 50 is that 50 is young 60. 40 is old 30. 50 is young 60. So when you're 50, you're a young old man, but when you're 40, you're an old young man. And so actually, it doesn't bother me. I think being 49, like in your 40s, you're just, it's like an extension of your 30s. Whereas when somebody's 50, it's like a new category of things. And so you never hear people say things like, he looks really, really good for 40. But people will often say things like, he looks really, really good, or she looks really good for 50, because the expectation of 50 is that you're old. So you just have to make the smallest amount of effort. And the idea is they're now measuring you against old people. All of us have like no hair or gray hair or things like this. That's the idea that they would be when you're in your 50s. So I'm actually not unexcited about it. But there is that understanding that you're certainly walking back down the mountain, right? So you know you're on the other side.
But the thing which I'm interesting is that I've had 2 close friends in the last couple of weeks, both have their 50th. And I remember my mother had her 50th, and she had this full-on suit and tie bash, like invited all her friends. It was a big thing. And both of my friends have gone, I didn't want anything. I just wanted it to be under the radar, quiet dinner with the immediate family. And that seems to be the sort of common sort of, I don't know what no one I know is going, let's go to Ibiza, let's rent a yacht and go crazy for my 50th. Like no one. And I'm trying to work out what's happening. Really?
Well, just on Facebook and stuff. It's not my thing. Like my 40th was a breakfast with my parents. And, I'd have dinner with, I wasn't really, I had breakfast with my family, and then I went to play board games in Germany. My 50th, my family is going to come out. I also think that maybe parties matter less to you when you're older, to some people. It certainly matters less to me. I would really rather, and again, back to your motorcycle thing. Yes, I don't do dirt, but I'd love to come and go see where Matt lives and ride with him and let him teach us how to do it. And that's what excites me about it. It's not that that's my hobby. My hobby is hanging out with good mates and doing something cool and getting to spend meaningful time together.
But I just want to quickly show you one thing, and this bothers me, right? So I've got a mate, George. His wife sent him a picture to forward to me to say, this is Spilly's doppelganger. I'm going to show it to you. I think you know who this is potentially.
Just
see it? Move it over
to your left.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
Jesus.
I know exactly who it is, but that picture looks exactly like you.
But I know, but now the thing which bothered me was that she saw this picture and went, that looks like Spilly. And I'm
No,
going,
it looks like old Spilly.
Yeah,
it looks
it
like old
does.
Spilly, I agree. But the fact is, as you said, Rich, I'm now in that category. Like she's not looking at a guy who's 20 years younger going, oh, Spilly's an older version of that dude. She's categorizing me as the old man, and that freaked me out.
No, I don't think that. I think it's just because if that guy was 20 years younger than you, but looks exactly like that, she would have sent the picture.
Maybe.
It's the idea that picture, there's so much that looks like you in it. It's quite bizarre. But yes, he's older. It's a view on you 20 years from now.
Exactly.
So, so at the end of the last episode, we were going to talk about death. So I think all this preamble about, potentially like age and skin issues, and Rich, your 50th coming up in October, and lots of people we know in our networks and groups also turning 50. It's kind of like this, as you said, Rich. It's kind of like you start walking down the hill from 50 in theory. So what are your initial thoughts on aging or walking down the hill? Like, what comes to mind for you first and foremost, Rich? Like, how do you feel about that?
Feel that it's quite a scary prospect, and it's forced me to try and think about things, and I want to learn. The first thing is, I think that I owe my parents a thank you for not ever burdening us with the fact that it's difficult. Like, I think we carry this. The reason people don't talk about this more is probably a good thing, because you don't want young people thinking about this before they need to think about it. And so my parents don't tell me that they're petrified of dying, and they don't go through that. This is something that they suffer with alone. And I'm pretty certain that they must be, because it is quite a scary prospect. And of course, some people, maybe the more religious you are, the more, I don't want to say excited, but the more, you're moving to something, you're graduating, you're going from high school to university. So that's pretty cool for you. Whereas for me, it's like, school's finished, now you got to get a job, where your job is that you're nothing and you don't exist. So that becomes quite tricky, and it's just trying to understand that. And what I don't want to do is I want to rationalize it properly, and just to do some of the hard work now, thinking about things and what will happen if I have dementia, and what will happen, how would I deal with all of these things? And I also had an interesting chat about assisted suicide the other day for really old and sick people, and and just it's really interesting to talk about these things and understand what I think about my suffering that I will go through on the way to die, because death is suffering. Even if you're lying peaceful, you're still thinking about it a lot. The process of knowing that you're close to death, I think, is suffering.
Yeah. And you, Brent, like, what are your initial thoughts on walking down the hill? How do you feel about that?
So I think what's interesting is that, so I think that you can't have the death conversation without speaking about religion to some degree. And I know Rich stands on this quite well, but I mean, I'm definitely of the belief that when it's done, it's done. There is no anything beyond that. I really do believe that, right? Like belief in the same way we believe in God. I don't think there's reincarnation. I don't believe there's an afterlife or a heaven or hell, any of that, right? And that should scare me into doing things that maybe are more hedonistic. And I say hedonistic is a very strong word, but stuff that's more like, I want to enjoy my life, do stuff that's a bit selfish, whatever that is, right? Selfish for me, which means time with my kids, or time on the bike, or family, whatever that is, right? But I tend to find that I think that what I'm doing, even though I still believe that there is nothing beyond that, is that I'm actually masking it with filling my day with stuff that's actually not meaningful. And often it's just work. So I often stop myself going, I know, because when I listen to other people atheists talk about death, they go, this is the show, there is no second curtain, like, do this properly now, have fun now. And I go, that's right. And then I tend not to do that. I tend to like slow myself down and fill my time with stuff that's not meaningful potentially. So I think that at this point of my life now, I'm trying to figure out what are those things that I want to be doing, and be way more deliberate with those things in the next couple of years. And it's a thing like Rich and I have been snowboarding a million times together. Like, I know that my body will not cope with snowboarding for another 10 years. Like, I think that at a certain point it's going to go like, this isn't fun anymore. Like, it's too sore, it's too hard, right? So I've got to like prioritize. Like, I can ride bikes probably into my 70s, potentially even into my 80s. There's no way I'm snowboarding into my 80s. So getting more snowboard holidays now and spend that money doing that versus the other thing. So prioritizing certain things based on my physical ability, I think is important. Also, the fact that your kids grow up, and Rich is further ahead than you, Matt, and you're further ahead than me. But it's also realizing that they do leave home, and there's moments which are like really, really important. Then they're gone, right? Like they leave. We left home. So it's also bringing those things forward. And then the one thing, just the last thing I want to say is that I had a financial advisor from the time I was 19, a guy called Ruby, old Jewish man. And he passed away about 2 weeks ago. And he was in his 90s, and he was very old school, no cell phone. But he used to call on all his clients physically with the newspaper and circle the shares that you had and little arrows up and down. And he'd analyze the newspaper, and he'd come once a month and sit with us and talk to me about my shares, whatever it was that I had. And he did that into his late 80s. Okay, he was driving to his clients, even though he had sold off his clients to other agents and stuff. People that he cared about, he made an effort to go and see. And he would talk about politics, and he would talk about the numbers in the markets and the Fed's interest rates and all those things. And he was fine, and I say fine, physically and mentally, up to 2 weeks before he died in his 90s. 2 weeks of, you call it suffering, Rich, 2 weeks of suffering, right? And I don't know how much suffering it was, but he literally just went off the cliff. And there's something to me where I'm going, the reason that he lived such a good life for so long is because he was engaging with people and he was working. It's a belief that I have, and I'm curious to hear where you stand on that. And it's not working, 6 to 6 every day, but it's engaging people and keeping your brain stimulated and being relevant to somebody. Call that purpose, for lack of a better word. But I think that's what, if you want to live a long life, I think that is really it's one of the keys that I think that you've got to keep working. And it may not be for the money, right? It's not about generating cash, hopefully not. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on longevity versus working or retirement, or, what is your experience?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was chatting to Nina about this the other day. So she just turned 40
something
46.
yeah.
And I was describing to her, like, if you think about let's just say that you have an 80-year lifespan. The first 40 years of your life, it's about addition. You're adding stuff, right? You're adding, husbands, wives, children, cars, careers, houses, material things, or whatever. And then you get to post 40, or in your case, Rich, it would be 50, because that's now the old 40, right? Or the old 40.
Yeah.
So, and then at that point, life then starts to become about subtraction. So you can't do jiu-jitsu anymore because you keep getting injured. You can't, ride motorbikes, or you start to not be able to do the things that used to give you a meaningful connection or experience to to life, right? And people and society and contribution, or what have you. And so for me, on the suffering thing, I actually think life is all about suffering. Like you suffer from the day that you're born to the day that you fucking die. And I think that if you accept the fact that that is what life is, then it actually gives you a lot of capacity to cope with life a lot better, because people, I think, I don't know necessarily where it comes from, it could be from the school system or whatever, but there's all these societal, like, mantras, where life is meant to be easy, and we learn these things as kids. And then as we grow older, even through the addition phases up, 20, 30, 40, you get your heart broken. Fucking sucks. You lose a business. Like, I've lost more businesses than I care to remember. Like, it fucking sucks. You get divorced. It fucking sucks. You have a child, okay, so you're feeling great, but then all the sleepless nights, right? And then the financial pressures and this, and the impact that children has on your marriages. It's beautiful on one side, but it fucking sucks. And then, of course, you get into the older, parts of your life in the subtraction years, and then people start dying. So, like, my mother died like 2.5 years ago. It fucking sucks. I got on Mother's Day, it's always a sad, happy time for me, because on one hand I have to celebrate Nina and that, but deep down I'm fucking, like, I'm hurting, bro. Like, you don't let go of that grief, and so I just drank myself into a stupor. It was bad, and, like, I don't deal with that shit, because grief is something that you have to just carry with you. There's not, you can go see therapists about it and stuff like this, but there's no rule book for it. Everybody handles grief in a different way. So Mother's Day is always a reminder to me about what I've lost, and she was huge for me in my life. You see what I'm saying? And so it fucking sucks. And then as you get older, your choices start to become more limited. This is where you were saying, Brent, like that old guy with the accounting. I think he got a lot of meaning through doing meaningful work. And I think like as you get older, and particularly what I love about motorcycle riding, like when I was going on that trip in Oklahoma and stuff, these guys were like, Pat was in the military for like 25 years. He's retired. He's 65 years old. Grant was 72. So these guys are doing 500 miles, dude. Like, it's impressive. And I'm like half their age, or 40. So I'm not even near like their life stage. And yet they ride as hard as I do. They have as much fun as I do. They get the same amount of meaningful connection out of that sort of experience, right? Because it's something like Pat's not going to go and go back to the military or do anything in that kind of vein again, because he can't, right? He's physically not able to do that. And so to answer your question, what I think is, as you get older, you have to figure out like what are the things that you can do that give you a meaningful connection to life as you start going through those years of subtraction. One more thing to throw into the conversation here, because I think it's important. So I think I mentioned this, or maybe if I didn't, but basically Ray Kurzweil was on the Joe Rogan show. He was talking about AI, and he reckons he's been in AI longer than anybody else, and he basically says that because of the rate that AI is developing, by the year 2049, so I'll be 54, my kids will be 32, that he reckons, and who knows if this will happen or not, but imagine that this
49,
is...
you'll be 64.
64, sorry. Excuse me, my bad. Thank you. And so he says that we will have the choice, because of the advancements of AI and robotics, in terms of being able to cure, skin stuff or brain tumors or whatever, that we'll actually have the choice to live forever, quote unquote, however long that might mean. And I thought that was quite an interesting possible scenario to consider, right? Because imagine like Franklin being 32 and having that choice. I mean, fuck, that's crazy.
Yeah, so it starts getting messy. So I love so much what you say. One, I agree with you. Life is suffering. Yeah, so and that's what it's supposed to be. And part of the joy comes out of, you run that really, really hard race, and then you get, to win at the end of it. It's really, really nice. I buy that completely. Brent, I think what you were saying about the aging, for me, the longer about your broker, that's why you got to be doing stuff, because the moment you stop doing stuff is when you get to the bus stop, and then you're just waiting. And I think when you're waiting, like you said, that's when suffering starts. So as long as you're busy, you're still getting to the bus stop. And the idea is to keep yourselves busy with something, whatever that may be, whether it's mentoring or volunteering or just sharing share prices with a newspaper with your customers. I think that's amazing. And it keeps your brain curious and alive, and it makes you feel like you've got something worth doing. And then when you get to the bus stop, then that's when you don't anymore. So, and I think that's when real suffering starts. And of course, for some people, maybe terminal illnesses and things, that choice gets made for them. Matt, I love your thing about additive subtractive. I think it's a really nice way of looking at it. I also think, though, that what you made me think about during it is that, well, it doesn't have to be that. Yes, when we stop being teenagers, we had to subtract some of our freedoms that we had, but then we added other things that we could do. And, when you told me about those guys, you're right. Maybe we're removing jiu-jitsu and snowboarding, but for a lot people, they might be adding, maybe that's when I get into doing 500-mile motorcycle rides, because that becomes my thing. And, my legs might not carry me, but my motorcycle certainly will. So I think the idea is to preserve the additive mindset as long as we can. And I think this is what happens. You can be on the other side of the hill, but you can keep adding stuff. And the more you add, I always talk about hobbies as recreational obsessions. So the more obsessed you are with some new hobby, some new thing, the more excited and on fire your brain is. And I think this pursuit of, people talk about the pursuit of happiness. I think the pursuit of hobbies will lead to happiness as a byproduct. And I think as the vocation starts becoming subtractive, because it becomes less important, and especially as you get older and older and older, I think then just making sure that your other vocations, your recreational obsessions are really, really high. And I think the end of life will not feel nearly like you've ended living. Right? So that's important. And then just on the Ray Kurzweil thing, well, I think theoretically, I'm not sure that we'd want to. We'd want to be exhausted, and I think part of, well, first of all, financially, the longer you stay alive, we've built up financial models that allow us to work for a certain period of time and then live off that. And yes, there are some people who are post-economic and they can technically live forever and they would be fine. But the average person needs to get dying about 20 years after they stop earning money, or else they become a burden on everybody else, and that becomes a reality. And so just because we can, I'm not sure it means we should. The second nuance part of that is, well, what have you offered me? Yes, well, you can carry on having the body of a 40-year-old, sleep well, exercise, do what you want, lived up to that, and then you become old and then you can die. I think that would be tricky, because then I would feel like life was robbed of me too soon. Like, I think becoming tired and is part of becoming ready. And I think readiness is important. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
So Rich, my dad's father lived to 102, and he used to come visit me at the factory years ago. And at that point, he was probably in his late 80s. And he used to say things like, I'm done. I'm bored. Like, I've seen everything, I've experienced everything, and I've had enough. But this thing, I'll use an example here, Rich. So, like, I know that you went through a phase where you were buying expensive toys. You were buying Porsches and expensive Mercedes Benzes, and there's a novelty and a newness to that, right? And now I'd say to you that no matter how much money you made, you're probably not going to buy another Porsche ever again. Like, you've done it, you're done. You've experienced that. And there's lots of things around, and I'm not talking about just materialism, just general experiences in life where you've got to a point that you've done something a few times and you've experienced it, right? You've experienced heartbreak more than once. You've experienced love more than once. You've experienced death. You've experienced wealth or, poverty. You've experienced tourism and travel. You've experienced like all of these things, right? And when you do it multiple times, eventually that experience becomes boring. Now, I get the fact that hobbies can keep you entertained for periods of time, often years and years, right? But when I think about my grandfather, he got to a point where he was like, I feel like I've seen it all in some form or fashion. I've experienced these kinds of things. And it's even the AR thing, right? Like, technologies. He's like, he saw World War I, World War II, the automobile, the airplane, so yes, there were new technologies, but then he was like, okay, so they're inventing new stuff. I've seen it. And eventually, like my friend Ruby, who passed away, you're like, I don't need the cell phone because I've seen the dawn of no phone to telephone, right? And it's like, I've seen the cell phone. There's going to be something in the future, but the idea of that progression becomes boring. So I do think that the idea of living forever would actually be a huge, no matter how healthy or how financially fit you were, you get to a point where you're like, I've slept with enough women, I've lost enough friends, whatever those things are. I think that you get to a point where life will be really, really boring. I really do believe that. And may not be in the 100 years we expect to live today, but at the 200, 250 years, my gut says you're bored to death. You've seen what you need to see and you no longer want to participate. So I think lifespans obviously have and will continue to, become longer and longer as medicine gets smarter and smarter. But I don't think that we want to live to 500 years. And like Rich, I think that the aging process is actually as painful, and life is full of pain, but as painful as it is, it's part of the process. You're learning about stuff. You're learning about slowing down. You're learning about appreciating certain things, or looking back and laughing with friends about their 30th or their 20th or that snowboarding holiday. Those are the things that are actually meaningful to you, where if you can just keep having that, I think it becomes meaningless.
Yes, again, because we're trying to protect other people, because I don't think you should be thinking of it till you have to think of it. And so that becomes tricky. Like, I wouldn't burden my children with this because I don't want them worried. And I also don't, you want to maintain their degree of innocence. But, it's like one of the things, my parents are both still here, thankfully, and I feel very, very lucky about that. But, where they live right now, they know that they're next in the natural queue. So they know that their job is to die next, which has got to be really scary. And, when they pass, hope it's a long time, then I'm the next in the queue. And I've got to accept that. And as a, I have two older sisters, but as, men, we're supposed to kind of generally die first. So I've got to realize that, okay, my next job is I've got to die. because I feel very, very strongly that the greatest gift that we can give to our parents is to mourn them so that they don't have to mourn us. Right? That's the gift. And so I expect the same for my children, but in order to do that, I have to go and die. And so it's yeah, it's just, I guess it's just quite hectic knowing that you're next in the line.
And what about the fact that, like, I think about this now, and obviously I'm 49 years older than my son, so that's quite a big gap, right? But what that also means is that I've had 49 years of life experience, good or bad, whatever that is, that I can give to my kid or give to my kids. And I'm trying to work out, like, from your perspective, how important is it to not discuss death necessarily, right? But like the general, like, there's this thing around when guys know they die, they then produce shitloads of contents for their kids, right? Like content. They get on a YouTube and they speak to, or they write letters, or they write a book for their kids. And there's a sense of, I want to give you all my knowledge and all my experience, like main vein, directly, as fast as I can, because I know it's coming to an end soon, right? Like there's a definitive date. But I often wonder, that do we spend enough time passing that knowledge down to our kids when we're still hopefully 50 years away, right? Whatever that number is, versus the rush of, like, I want to teach you stuff. I want you to experience stuff, and like do stuff that I didn't do, enjoy it, like the lessons, right? How much time do you think? And it's not about being a good parent. We all want to be good parents, but in terms of proactively going, okay, let's talk about money. Let's talk about love. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about capitalism. Let's talk about whatever those things are. Do you guys, I mean, my kids are still so young, but do you guys talk about it actively? Or is it when they raise it or when it's something of interest?
Not nearly enough. And I think it's probably like one thing that, let's just say, you know, God forbid I got killed like next week, you know what I mean? It would be something that I would regret massively not doing more of, because you guys know, like, you get busy, you can't like, if you know you're going to die in 6 months, okay, fine, you've got 180 days to do stuff. And so because you're operating within a much more constrained time period, your whole perspective changes, and therefore your actions and behavior changes. And so this is why they do a video a day to talk about finance, sex, blah blah blah, because you know that it's the greatest gift you can ever give your legacy, really, is empowering them for the suffering that they're about to go through, as we touched on earlier. And so one of the things that's quite interesting at Frank's school, they have like every week, the mom and or the dad, so basically Frank writes a letter to me, next week writes a letter to mom replies, dad replies. And it's really interesting to have your kid, who's more, or Frank's 9, to actually write you a letter. And he'll say stuff like, I'm sorry you're so stressed, or, they see things, but they can't understand things. And so then they write, I'm sorry that, you were so stressed, or I'm sorry that I upset you the other day. I'm really looking forward to Father Christmas coming, you know what I mean? And so it's very endearing. But the point I'm trying to make is it's that process of, like, once a week, just writing like a paragraph, dude. Like, hey, man, you rode that quad bike awesome at Kebler Corner on Memorial Day. So proud of you, or you were an amazing brother to your sister, when this happened, and just kind of reaffirming their sense of self-worth. And it's amazing, actually, how differently he writes to me versus how differently he writes to his mother. And so there's a very interesting dynamic. So Frank, he told me the other day he's scared of me. And I said to him, why, like, what are you scared of? So he's scared of telling me how he's feeling about a certain thing, whatever that is. So I don't know how much of this is true or whatever, but I'm certainly, like, the buck stops with me, and he's learned that. So, like, you can push mom to a point, and mom's not exactly a walkover at all. But if you fuck with mom, dad's going to come, to basically tell you how you're going to behave moving forward, or there's going to be massive consequences or whatever. So he is scared to communicate with me, you know what I mean? And I think knowing that as a father, like, how the fuck do you respond to that? And so that's like, so do you write him a letter to go, hey buddy, I was also scared about my dad. or with my father. And in fact, it's actually healthy at your age to have that kind of healthy respect. It's not a bad thing. But as you get older, you'll learn that that fear turns into more love, and more understanding. And it's only because your dad is an adult man, and you should fucking be scared of, like, what, son isn't scared of their father. Most of us are, especially certainly in the generations we were growing up in. But like maybe helping him to understand that stuff. And so anyway, to wrap up, I think my point is like, I think knowing what you know, what would you do differently anyway? Because if you know that you're going to die, like, why are you waiting? You know what I mean? Like, you should start a blog. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Coach, but I was thinking about it now, right? Like there's so many sort of organizations and associations and groups out there to deal with certain things, right? We were just talking about like assisted suicides earlier, but I'm wondering whether there's a place for that. Once a year, hypothetically, the three of us would get together and go, right, you've got 365 days left. What are the top 3 things that you want to do this year, or say, or experience, or whatever those are? And then have some kind of an accountability group for that, specifically because it's like, these are the most important things we're talking about, more than anything else, right?
Before we go there, because that's a whole other topic. I mean, I think we could do, right. In fact, I would like to suggest that let's make this the next topic we're going to discuss, the idea of literally the kick the bucket list. So I have a very active list. One of them is about to be ticked off, which is to ride the mountain course at the Isle of Man TT, which I'm really excited about. I'll do in the next 2 weeks. But I want to stay with the idea of teaching our kids thing for a second, just because I think that's a different topic. So if you don't mind,
sure. Okay, no, cool, go.
The first thing is, let me go in reverse. Let me go back from Matt. I think part of the reason. There's a weird thing there when I think about this fear thing, and I agree with you. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think there is a weird relationship between fear and respect. And I think that if my kids didn't have a healthy intimidation, maybe isn't a better word, if they didn't have a healthy level of intimidation for me as a leader, or just like my team, if my team didn't have an intimidation when they were coming and presenting work to me, it means that they don't give a fuck about my opinion. So there is a relationship between that intimidation and respect. And we can get all hippie if we want and say it's not true, but I think there's something to that. Okay, some of the greatest, most driven people in the world, they were willing to be hated in order to do amazing work, and they brought the best out of people. And sometimes that's what we have to do. The second thing is on being afraid. When I look at why I was afraid of my dad, it's funny. My mom was way more day-to-day scary. She would pinch us when we were driving, and she would shout at us a lot more. But she would also turn around and say, "Do you want me to tell your father when he comes home?" And so mom built the threat of dad coming home as way scarier. And I can guarantee you, if my dad was angry with us, it was because he came in and my mom said, just go and give him a serious talking to. My dad probably had to psych himself up like, right, I do not want to. So it's the kind of role thing. But here's the thing, guys, just on the teaching. And my kids are a bit older, 21 and 16. And we don't have to be teaching because they're always learning. So your kids are learning everything they need to learn. You can write a blog post, for your children about this is how I live my life. They'll either read this and think this is disingenuous, or they already know it. Because I'm sure, yes, should I have invested? And I chat to them. My kids know my biggest regret is I didn't start investing earlier. And, Callum started investing from when he was 15, Bailey slightly younger, but she's not as active because she's got pocket money, whereas he had a job. But he has never missed it. We chat about investments all the time. And, he's 21 years old. So we do instill those things, but it's because as I learn them and what I read, I share with my children. But our kids will learn what we're doing. So if we are busy at work trying to drive something and we're not there at, and we get home after dinner, then your kids are learning that's what a dad is supposed to do, whether it's right or wrong. So I think we just have to be mindful that it's less about sitting down and doing the lessons, which we have to do at the appropriate times. And at the appropriate times, we will do it. It's more about understanding that they are learning how to behave by observing us. And so we just need to make sure that the behavior is something we want to echo, or we want them to echo. And the second part of that is this is my life too. So I don't exist solely as a teacher of my children. I also exist as a a 49-year-old man who's trying to enjoy my life as well. So not everything I do is in service of giving the perfect life lesson. Sometimes
Completely.
it's okay that I'm doing things just because actually I'd really like to stay a bit later and have a chat with my friends tonight.
But also, it's like the one lesson I'd give my son is do not get on a motorbike. It is the stupidest thing in the world you'll ever do. Like, especially in South Africa, like don't do that, right? But then there I am. So like, there are ways, there are things where we're doing things that I wouldn't want my kids to instill in my kids necessarily. Maybe it's a left field example, but there are also things that I find that my regrets in life, and maybe Rich, I wish I started investing earlier, is a regret of yours. And it's not a regret on a list, but it's something you wish you just did earlier. Passing that knowledge on, going, guys, compound interest, right? This is the thing.
Absolutely
Just
regret,
keep
by the
doing
way.
this. Like, do you?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I totally wish I'd started investing earlier. There's no doubt in my mind. And Brent, my kids, I said to them, about the motorcycles. I say, yes, but I is do as I do. Start riding in your 30s. Learn the road and use the roads for a good 10 years, and then start to do it. And I guess there's other people who are doing street racing since they were 12, but then
sure,
that's but our kids will learn from us.
No, it is their life, and it's theirs to experience. And ours aren't by any means perfect. We certainly haven't been model anything. I don't believe. So like, it's passing stuff that we sort of want them to know, again, at the right time. But I do think what's sitting around this is that because we're getting older, the sense of I want to instill certain things, and Rich, I'm on the investment thing as well. I'm like, I want my kids to understand how money works. I want them to understand how money flows into a household and out of a household, and like just those basic principles. Yeah, like an adult.
Manage money like a fucking grown up. I'm reading Scott Galloway's at the moment, and I've read Untouchable, the Tony Robbins one. Yeah, the Algebra of Wealth.
Did you read Psychology of Money?
Yes. Morgan Housel. I've read parts
of it.
Morgan
Housel. I loved that book. Loved it.
But I'm saying for that very, very basic knowledge, Sam Beck-Messenger's Manage Your Money Like a Fucking Grown Up is honestly brilliant, especially for South African kids.
Okay, good to hear.
Sorry, Matt, we've spoken over you for a bit there.
No. I'm enjoying this life lesson thing. I think
Matt's basically our kid here. I mean, he's so young that we're giving him all our lessons.
Teach me what it's the stage you're in, right? Because Matt is, he might be younger, but he's an older dad than you, if that makes sense. He's a dad to elder, so he's in a different phase. Sure. We're all in different phases for different things. Listen, I want to drop an idea with you because I think it's related to this. This speaker came to one of my forums the other day, and he spoke about the idea of roles instead of goals. And I've become quite obsessed with it. And it goes back to what I was saying that, I have a role as a father, but that is not who I am. It is in the same way, I always say to you guys, I don't identify as being a board gamer. I play board games. I'm not a biker. I ride motorcycles. I'm not the thing that I do. I'm just one of the things I do. So I am not just a father, but I'm also a father. And he turned around and he said, instead of having goals, the idea is to sit down and think about all the roles that you have in your life and set aside meaningful, I guess, what do I think I should be doing as a brother? What do I think I should be doing as a son? What do I think I should be doing as a boss? What do I think I should be doing as a mentor? What do I think I should be doing as a podcast host with you guys? What do I think? And literally listing all the roles that you have. And then creating victory conditions to a degree for short game victory conditions for each of them. And I think that's a good way of being busy, to give you something to do, because the roles change in different areas of life. And you'll realize that can be additive. I've recently started mentoring a couple of people, and that is a new role that I have. I've done it previously. And so it's just quite an interesting exercise to go through, to list all the roles that you are.
It's interesting because you don't actually recognize, or you don't become aware necessarily all the time, like when those roles change. I mean, even you can put that role as like a husband. Okay, so within that role of being a husband, like if you change the context, your victory condition will change. So if your wife's bitching and moaning about her career, here's what your victory condition should be. However, if she's feeling depressed, it should also change, you see. So I think there's a lot of nuance in what that means. And so because there is so much nuance, and then you turn around and then there's my baby girl and she's, walking around with some scissors. What's your victory condition then? Equally, when she's doing something very well, like she loves doing like cartwheels and she's always like busy, very, very busy, and like how should you be, behaving then? But you just kind of go through life on autopilot where shit's just fucking coming at you. You know what I mean? Like your wife's there, and then now she's talking about this thing, and then it's like, oh, what about this? And then it's like, then there's two kids, and then you hop on a Zoom call, and then suddenly you're dealing with the employees. And so I love that idea. It's like, I think where I'm going with that is like clarity is obviously the goal there, right? And so the more clarity you have, the better you might be.
But you can think of things as well, like say as a parent, if I look at the standard parenting style now, it's one of protector. So I think my job as a role as a parent is to protect my kids from and hide the hardship of life from them, because they'll experience it eventually. Whereas I think that every other generation of humanity's mindset was to let our children, to prepare our children for the difficulty of life, and let them exercise for the race before they get there. So we're sending our kids into the Olympic of difficultness, but we're making them walk in without a day of training. Because we don't want our kids to do a hard thing. We don't want them to, if a kid has got a paper route, that's child labor. Like, when did that become bad? That was character building when I was young. You were supposed to work from, 11, 12, 13, help your parents, wash cars, do things like that. Now that's seen as a bad thing. So I think when you sit and you work out your roles, it does help you think about how your behaviors should be.
Scott Galloway was saying that, like, the parenting now is that you touch your kids with oven mitts all the time. Like you've always got soft padding on everything you do around them to protect them, which he doesn't believe is right either. The one thing it's also
protect means don't prepare, right? These two ideas are inversely proportionate to each other. The more you protect your children, the less you prepare them. It's like you're in the fallout shelter and you're pretending that the outside isn't hard, and then you let them loose one day. They won't survive the wild.
Yeah, much harder. The thing which also interests me about this entire conversation is that, not that our parents were doing podcasts, but my gut says the thinking and the fears and the unknowns and the situations as they matured and as the kids matured has been the same for generations, regardless of technologies, environments, and ease of use and medical and all the improvements. I think that our parents have all just always been like, this is scary. We don't know what we're doing. Our parents are getting old. Like, it's probably been the same sort of conversation, whether they were having the conversation or not. The thinking, I think, has been the same forever. And what's amazing about that is that no one has solved this problem. Like, no one has figured out, and maybe the Buddhists have, right? But like, no one has gone, I know how to find joy from now till the end. Like, I know what that looks like. Because there is no single solution.
It's not joy, right? It is suffering. So they recognize that suffering is the obstacle is the way.
Is the joy. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So let's wrap this up, guys. What are your final thoughts on this whole conversation about death and so on and so forth?
Go hug your kids.
Just think about things. The biggest thing is to have long conversations with yourself about meaningful things, because I think people go through life, not, again, what we just described as parents, we do to ourselves as well. We treat ourselves with oven gloves. And I think we need to take the oven gloves off the hard thing that we're going to go through as well. Don't stress about them early. I think anxiety is a waste. So it's not like, I should stress about death, but I should start understanding what I think about it and how to just have conversations with myself about it. I think we need to always be open to reality.
And your partners, I think my kind of final thoughts would be like through a story. So picking up the bike thing again. So obviously, to your point, Brent, like, it's a dangerous thing to do, right? You can actually get killed or worse.
Or worse, right? Yeah, exactly.
And so she was, we had this massive Barney, dude. She was like, you always on the fucking motorbike, blah, 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 blah. It's like, I'm going on my bike. This is my thing. If you need to find your thing, you fucking go do your thing. And so it disintegrated into this like massive Barney. And afterwards, to your point, Rich, about taking off the oven mitts with yourself, so I was like, well, okay. So what was actually driving the conversation there? not less, obviously from myself, but also a bit like from her side, like where was it actually coming from? And so I landed on this whole thing is obviously coming from fear. It's less about the time. It's more about, well, what if something happens to you? Am I going to do, with as you being the breadwinner for the family, all this kind of stuff. So the next day I took out $1 million life insurance policy. And I went to her that day and I said, listen, I've taken out $1 million life insurance policy, just so you know that if anything happens to me, that you and the kids will be, you'll be okay. So then, as a consequence of that, and obviously this is about death, right? As a consequence of that, we were away for Memorial Day, and we were having a couple of drinks, whatever. And she said to me, I want you to go and ride wherever you want to go. Like, I'm worried about your psyche. I need you to know that I'm okay with whatever you want to do. And so the point is that it was a complete 180 from why are you always doing the thing to go and do that thing. Do you know what I mean? Because she was now feeling like she understood that if something happens to me, that her and the kids will be somewhat okay. You see?
Okay.
So I think being transparent with yourself and with the people that love you about like, well, what if, then put shit in place so that you can protect the legacy of your greatest gifts, right?
Yep.
Which are your kids.
That's practical. I like
and make sure they have all your passwords. I mean, so Jazz has an envelope that has my master password and all these things, because that's the worst burden, right? If you've not prepared a death list, I actually sent one as part of my EO form, a list of the forms and letters and things you have to prepare. And it's a worthwhile exercise to go through. It feels quite somber when you realize that you're allowing yourself to prepare for death. Because I put off writing that list for so long, because writing that list and doing all of those things made it feel like I was ready to die. And I don't want to be ready to die, but I want to be ready if I do.
Yeah.
I send my wife an email every single year, like, this is what you need to know when I die, and she always hates it. But I literally send an email, and it's the new accountant who's got the banker, the passwords, all my policies, like copies of, like, it's just this monster document that I send her, like this monster email. And if something happens, you've got the latest version, and it's going out in the next couple of weeks again.
To those listening, if you're still listening to this now, please do me a favor and please drop in your thoughts on this, especially the kind of things that because I really want to this is something I want to be thorough on. Let us know in the comments, either, wherever we post this and wherever you're watching it. If you're listening on a podcast, pop over to YouTube. Let us know in the comments, what are you doing? What are the things that you're leaving for your spouse and your loved ones? How are you making sure, not that you're ready to die, but you're prepared not to be a burden when you do? I'd really, really like to, and I'm genuinely curious about this. This isn't some kind of, I'm trying to get comments, because I want to make sure that I'm thorough on this.
I love that. Gentlemen, always a pleasure.
Word.
See you soon.
Yeah, man.
Enjoy.
See you guys soon.
Later.
Ciao. Bye.
Ciao.